I am the CMO of Deloitte. I'm also a series editor of this paper, Building the Lucky Country, which I'm going to talk to you about. But just to explain the dissonance between the image you have in your brochure today and the person you see in front of you, this line of hair on my upper lip is because I'm the national champion for Movember within Deloitte. Every November I put my marriage at risk and dig deep, as it were. I'd encourage you to support your Movember, Mo Bros and Mo Sisters. Plug over. The purpose of Place Reconsidered, what do we mean by that? About 5 years ago at Deloitte, we wanted to take a bigger, more expansive view of the issues which transcend political cycles and economic fluctuations. And at that time, with a revolving door on the political scene, it was really incumbent upon us to take a longer-term view of some of the issues which really affect Australia's prosperity. And by that I mean a bigger notion of prosperity than just material wealth, but a sense of a flourishing, enlivened, vibrant communities, all benefiting from economic wealth. And so we looked at a series of issues over the last 5 years, one per year. The skills shortage, digital disruption. Dr. Busch spoke eloquently about the impact of digitalisation. We did a sort of a tracking survey of its impact and timing on various industries. Positioning for prosperity, if you like, how to position Australian business at the intersection of global opportunity and Australian man-made or natural advantage. And getting out of your own way, how do you actually cut down on the amount of needless, at times self-imposed self-regulation. And so we've turned now to the purpose of place and asked Australia to reconsider that. And just thinking and elevating what the Minister for Transport and Dr. Busch were talking about, you know, efficient cities, efficient transport and infrastructure, what is it for? It's actually for more efficient cities, but that means connecting people with people. Connecting people within cities, connecting cities to cities, connecting cities to towns and rural areas. And that means a better quality of life and prosperity if that's done efficiently. What we've asked to do with this paper, and it was launched, by the way, by John Rao at NOLA, one of, in line with the government's sort of enlightened approach to licensing, a number of new bars have sprung up around Adelaide, and that's an example I'm going to talk about a little bit later in terms of vibrancy. What we've said with this paper is that Australia needs to start a conversation about the importance of place. What do we mean by that? When we talk about prosperity, we think of three dimensions. Population, the number of people actually participating in the economic idea. Participation, the level or the degree of engagement. And productivity. And both speakers have talked fervently about the need to boost productivity through participation, through efficiency, through technology. Why is it so important? Well, we have declining terms of trade facing us. Obviously the tailing off of the mining boom, the aging of the population, various other aspects are actually putting impost on our living standards. And so to really look for the last remaining opportunity to boost prosperity, we have to look to productivity growth to sustain material welfare. So place is obviously a magnet for investment and for industry, but place is also important for human prosperity, that bigger idea that is more than just wealth in a material sense, but which is actually formed by the strength of the relationships that we have with each other. That indefinable buzz that actually afflicts a place like Adelaide around the time of the festival or WOMAD. That sense of belonging and being valued that people feel within a community. So place within a knowledge economy has sort of altered. If you look at that chart, that's something we've tracked since 1980, and it really shows the proportion of workers employed in different strata of industry. And what we're seeing is that going forward, the proportion of knowledge workers or service industries is going to far outstrip, with the gap between primary, secondary and tertiary industry, as it were, is going to increase. And that sort of speaks to the trend which has been happening for centuries. Over time, the relationship of people with place and the purpose that we've assigned to place has evolved and changed. In the agricultural era, we obviously valued a place for what we could grow there. And in the industrial era, it was more about what you could mine there or its location and access to markets for distribution, for transport, for logistics, and so forth. But in the knowledge economy that we're moving increasingly into, it's about the production of services. And the purpose of place is increasingly to drive innovation and productivity growth through the productive interaction of knowledge workers. You get that sort of spark of innovation and creativity caused by proximity. Now, I've worked in the creative industries, and I know that the debate is long and passionate about the diminishing role of place. The tyranny of distance is being overcome by technology. But what we've actually hypothesized in this paper is that that may be so, but you get incredible amenities and that multiplier effect of knowledge when you actually have people living in closer communities. And it's up to us to actually figure out how to make that work by better living conditions, because there is a tension there. And that's congestion, the lowering quality of life. You know, proximity can unleash congestion and disamenity, as it were. This tracks the congestion cost to economies of growing city populations. You can see Adelaide is actually crossing the line, dropping that trend line, getting into the territory of above average. And what this says is that proximity is great. It's sort of it can drive us to greater heights of creativity and innovation, but at the cost at times of our own health and sanity. It's not only overcrowded roads and congestion, which can, faulty infrastructure can drive us to. It's at times a lack of affordable housing. So that's replaced the sort of the squalor and disease of the industrial age, but it's just as much of a problem. So what we did in our research was to look at the 5 levels of regional place in Australia. Now, there's this sort of very bland point of view that Australia is about the city and the bush, but we all know it's far more nuanced than that. So we broke it down into 5 sort of levels of region, if you were, types of place. And the inner city, CBD and adjoining, inner metro, 5 kilometres from the centre. The suburbs between the inner city and the urban fringe, the outer urban areas, which are really the borderline between metropolis and the countryside, regional cities, which are set agglomerations of population over at 10,000 people, and then outback and rural and remote, as it were, which is effectively towns less than 10,000 and uninhabited areas. You can see that Australia is extremely focused, extremely polarized between those areas. And then we did an analysis of these 5 types of place within Australia and sort of looked at the 10 measures of prosperity which tend to enrich or detract from the quality of life and the prosperity momentum that happens within these places. Because for a place to drive prosperity, we know it has to drive far more than our material needs. So this is we believe, a far richer set of measures to capture prosperity now and the potential of a place to drive it in future. So the first 3 measures are what we call inputs. They're the building blocks, if you like, to prosperity. And they're things like human resources, people power, natural resources, the natural, the water sources, the minerals, the endowed wealth, if you like, of a place. And physical capital, what we've invested in the past, buildings, infrastructure, equipment. The second part are boosters, and they effectively influence the effectiveness by which the inputs are applied. So if we talk about social capital, we're talking about connections between people. How easily does a place facilitate that natural connectivity within people that when you get that buzz, and how does it conversely dislocate those connections between people? Innovation and entrepreneurship. the desire for the new and the willingness to take risk. We see in certain areas around the world, like the Bay Area in San Francisco, where I lived for 5 years, it's just extraordinary the amount of innovation that seems to be in the DNA of the place. What is it? It's not just government conditions or policy, it's simply an output of the place, a booster of the place. And leadership and contribution, how willing, how capable are people to step up and take the lead? And finally, these outputs, a way of measuring prosperity, things people care about, you know, that make for flourishing places and prosperous lives, like health and safety. How safe do people feel? Physically, mentally, and emotionally. Material standards, economic well-being, natural amenity, the beauty of the surroundings, if you like. And local amenities, which are all about accessibility and convenience to meet people's everyday needs. And that obviously speaks to infrastructure and transport. They are really key to increasing the quality of local amenities. Now the paper, I'm not going to dissect how we've actually tracked the 5 levels of place on these spider charts. What I will say is that the paper is, I think we've got copies of the paper outside. CEDA can send you the link to the website and we can provide you with the research. But what we did was we tracked these 5 different levels of place to actually look at how they rate in terms of these measures of quality of life, of propensity to generate prosperity. And there is obviously a wide fluctuation in their ability to provide on all 10. What these charts do is, effectively, if the line is extended to the extreme, the natural amenity, as it were, in that chart for outer urban, whereas they're very, very lower on innovation and entrepreneurship, which you might get in the inner city. Regional cities, high quality health and safety, good quality of life. Once again, lower in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship, high on social capital, great connectivity, etc. So this is a way of just looking at the propensity of place to provide that. And obviously we're looking at creating that momentum, that cycle of prosperity, if you like, that creates a flourishing place. Transport infrastructure has a vital role to play that. What you want to avoid is that dystopian cycle of a place which becomes blighted by substandard conditions, you know, economic dislocation, social fragmentation. And the languishing place on the right, once you get into that cycle of dystopian decline, it's a very hard cycle to kick. Some places have done it very effectively. If I think of New York during the 1970s and the mayor's very determined effect to arrest that decline, done a very, very good job. Birmingham, once again, through the 70s and 80s, a major city in Britain, was a blighted city for a long time, and now it's a thriving metropolis, really hallmarked by scientific, artistic, creativity, innovation, and high levels of investment. So this spectrum of difference between the flourishing and the declining place. So there are 4 dynamic forces at work that actually interact to catalyze that flourishing of place. Obviously, people are the basic ingredient of prosperity, and they need to be present in a place in appropriate numbers for a variety of skills and outlooks. So it's great if there are a bunch of millennials in the inner city, but it also helps to have some super boomers and some longer term views from a spectrum of generational. You need a degree of locals, you need a degree of transience and migration and so forth. Community needs to form a sense of identity and purpose and values, and that's the way you get opposition to rapacious development, you know, fractured communities caused by urban sprawl. Technology, which is what we're talking about a lot today, can help people live more comfortably in close proximity, and it can actually stimulate productivity through smart cities, through connecting people and getting this knowledge dividend, and through diffusing congestion. We're going to hear from David from Uber. We've already heard from Stephen on the government's efforts. We all see is this a key opportunity to boost productivity and flourishing cities through reducing congestion. And finally, governance, which really strikes the balance between the individual and collective decision-making on issues like infrastructure, on these issues. So what about South Australia? What about your place? You know, South Australia is the most concentrated state in the country in terms of its urban focus. These are questions worth asking. Is it flourishing or languishing? Are people coming or going? What are the sort of jobs are they coming to get, or what are they leaving for? Is community life vibrant, or is it flagging? And is technology ubiquitous, or is it outmoded and intermittent? Do people have a say in the decisions being made that affect them? And what is the role of infrastructure in all of the above? We're thinking about who can act to create this cycle of prosperity, if you like, the flourishing cycle. It isn't just about government. As we found with the red tape regulation paper that we published last year, the knee-jerk reaction is to put the responsibility on government to reduce red tape. But in fact, we found in our research that businesses' self-imposed regulation is worth twice the cost to the Australian economy than government red tape. So too with the responsibility for place. It isn't just up to government. Of course, government is the one fixed in terms of physical space, because it is by nature responsible for place. People, businesses, communities have the option to get up and leave if they want. But it really implies a fertile interaction between these four actors, if you like. Ultimately, the paper we've done is about a call for collaboration between these four groups, all of whom have much to gain by creating flourishing spaces, because prosperity isn't just about luck, it's about deliberate actions that set a virtuous circle in train. And any of these actors can take the initiative. So it's worth having a look at these ideas, reconsidering the purpose of place. What does flourishing look like? Which of the 10 dimensions of prosperity most needs to improve? And which of those four dynamic forces can most likely catalyze the virtuous circle? And which of the four, how can the four actors best collaborate with the others to set the process in motion? And when we talk about taking action, this is the last slide, you know, thinking about South Australia and Adelaide in particular, I think the government's attitude is very enlightened on a number of levels to setting in train this cycle of prosperity and flourishing, if you like, the virtuous circle. NOLA is a good example. So is things like Adelaide Oval. You know, Adelaide Oval's reinvigoration, if you like. Adelaide Oval now has the highest in attendance, I believe, average attendance in the country outside the MCG, but we know that Victorians will watch paint dry. The Regent Arcade, the Vibrant City Initiative, which is one of the government's 10 economic priorities. The idea of bringing more people into the inner city through loosening height limits and streamlining planning. And the one that really sparks my imagination, and we focused on this in this paper, was Renew Adelaide. Renew Adelaide actually, as a concerted collaboration between business, government, community, it originated in Newcastle in New South Wales, but it's been refined and considerably improved upon in the Adelaide theatre. And I just wanted to show this quick video by Lily Jacobs, the CEO of Renew Adelaide, because it really is a great example of a couple of the actors, as we call them, collaborating to create this cycle and set the cycle in motion. Caleb, could we have that video, please?
Renew Adelaide was started by a group of volunteers from the creative sector who really wanted to see some unique, creative and really localised activity that forms part of the built fabric of our city. So core purpose is to foster creative enterprise in vacant commercial space to kind of bring the city alive. And we do that through a fairly unique model of leasing or licensing. So the standard model is it's a 30-day rolling rent-free licence, which means that we find a property and we find a creative business or project to go into that property, which means the owner, if they get a commercial tenant, can give 30 days notice to the project to vacate. So the owner's not losing an opportunity to get a commercial tenant, but in the meantime, a creative startup is really getting that opportunity to test their idea, to try something new, and to add something really innovative to the city. So we've worked with retail, we've worked with hospitality, we've worked with arts and community projects, and that depends a little bit on the building that we have available and also what the area needs and what ideas come from the people. It's a really important part of what we do, is that it comes from a localised ideas. Renew Adelaide's worked on a variety of spaces and projects, so from things like Topper Mall, where we are now, which would involve the placement of 5 startup creative businesses, and also a light redesign of what has a fairly dated space to make it more engaging to people as they're passing through. The program encourages people to test something in a really low-risk model so that they can grow that, so that they can innovate, so that they can do that without fear. So some examples of projects we've worked with just recently, like the Bagelry, which is Adelaide's first solely bagel-devoted shop. And they've got a really niche product, but they present it in a really engaging way, and they're really focused on offering consumers something they haven't otherwise had. We've found that we've had really positive economic outcomes just by focusing on having people who are committed to an area or committed to their idea and giving them the opportunity to grow it. It's a big part of the broader purpose of the Renew Adelaide program, is to drive foot traffic to an area and to engage people in the area. And we've seen that in Region Arcade, where we placed 7 startup businesses that actually added to the overall foot traffic. And within a couple of months of us being there were 3 new commercial tenants because it had become an attractive area to be again. And so Renew Adelaide works with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different sectors of the community. We work closely with government, who fund and support the program. We work with property owners who control the building stock that we work with. We work with more and more working with the private sector, who are interested in how they can support the startup businesses and what they can offer to really help them grow. And with the creative and community sectors, who are the ones generating the ideas, taking the risk on their new projects and really driving the momentum of what can happen. You don't change a place without having the community involved, without having businesses involved, without having the property sector and government, and everyone actually has to work together to change places and understand what is possible if you do work together.
So I love what's happening in Topper Mall. It really, having lived in England for several years as well, and seeing the homogenisation, if you like, of every shopping mall in the country, the same set of chain stores along it, it just sucked the character out of market towns across Britain. Adelaide has a great opportunity to create something uniquely Adelaide oriented and as a flourishing exposition of its own culture. And so too across the state, issues like there are parts of this state which are doing fantastically well by this catalytic cooperation between the parties. Other parts of the state are doing it tougher. The northern suburbs, obviously, of Adelaide, where Holden will be closing, is doing it tough. But I'm encouraged to see the work and the intent of the Stretton Centre to lead research and policy development around creating more sustainable economic futures through collaboration between community, University of Adelaide, and every level of government. So I'll close there by saying, when we look at the technology, the opportunities for improved transport and infrastructure, you could say we've never had it so good in terms of the opportunities that technology provides us. But the corollary question is, good for what? The outcome that we're looking for is a better quality of life and a bigger notion of prosperity, which is around flourishing places, flourishing cities, flourishing lives. Thank you.